Yo, what's up everyone? My name is Sixang, and today we're going to be doing a review on Sonic Frontiers. Frontiers is the latest entry in the Sonic series, and it's definitely been a long time coming. This is the first mainline Sonic game released by Sonic Team in the last 5 years, and it goes without saying, this has been one of their most ambitious projects to date. Sonic Frontiers is what most people would consider an open world game, but the game has been marketed as an open zone game. Along with this, Sonic now has a unique combat system and is able to battle enemies in all new ways. Sonic Frontiers was released on November 8th of this year and was made available on all major platforms. I purchased this game for my Xbox Series X since I wanted to experience one of the higher quality versions of this game. The reason I mention this is because your experience may vary if you're getting this game for the Switch or PS4. Although not broken or unplayable by any means, the graphics and frame rates differ from the PC and next-gen versions of this game. I remember when Frontiers was first teased in 2021. I was skeptical at the time, and as the leaks and rumors began to come true, it had me both hyped and scared. Could we really trust Sonic Team to make a game like this? The same team that has been playing it safe for the past decade? Well, as some of you are aware, the first gameplay trailer really brewed up a storm. Not only did the game look unpolished, the open zone looked super boring and empty. It was a horrible start to this game's marketing campaign, and I still wonder why they decided to present this game in this manner. But as time passed and we got closer to the release date, things started to change and reception started to become more positive. Not only did we start to get proper gameplay footage and better teaser trailers, but people were able to play a demo of this game at different conventions across the world. We were able to see people's opinions on this game, and I'd say most of the feedback was positive. Now, with all this in mind, I decided to board the hype train and it was full steam ahead. But did I jump the gun too early and set myself up for disappointment? That's what I'm here to talk about in this video. Before we dive into this, just want to let you know that this video will contain spoilers. So what exactly is going on in Frontiers? A lot, actually. First, let me give you a general synopsis of the story. Eggman decides to travel to the Starfall Islands, where he has set out to tap into old technology that belongs to a group named the Ancients. Upon accessing the tech with his AI assistant Sage, things don't go according to plan and Eggman gets dragged into what's called cyberspace. The game then cuts to a scene with Sonic, Tails, and Amy flying towards the Starfall Islands. They are going to the islands because they have detected the Chaos Emeralds being there, but before they can land, they get sucked into a portal that leads them into cyberspace. Now, you may be wondering, what is cyberspace? In short, it's a different dimension from reality, but in context of the story, it's more complex than that. I'll go into more detail later on in the video. Sonic is fortunate enough to escape cyberspace by traversing it like a normal level, but his friends weren't so lucky. When he gets out, he realizes his friends are nowhere to be found. However, an ominous voice begins speaking to Sonic and gives him instructions on what he can do. With saving his friends being his top priority, Sonic decides to follow these instructions and begins a new adventure. The first open zone area you get to explore with Sonic is named Kronos Island. Immediately, you'll notice the feeling of the environment is very somber. The islands have day and night cycles as well as weather changes, but even when the sun is out, it never feels uplifting and positive. This tone is something that is recurring in Frontiers and gives the game a more serious vibe, something that I liked right off the bat. Kronos is one of 5 islands featured in Frontiers, and although once you progress through the game you can travel between them at will, they are not actually interconnected, meaning that you can't run from one island to the other, you have to load in from the map's menu. This is why I believe Sonic Team was stern about calling it an open zone game and not an open world game, and this was totally fine to me. Each island feels just right in terms of size, and moving across the zones as Sonic takes some time, which is good. The biggest critique I have about them is the variety of biomes. The first 3 islands, Kronos, Ares, and Chaos, all have unique biomes, but the last 2 islands, Rhea and Uranos, are very similar to Kronos. Not only that, Kronos and Rhea are technically connected. Rhea is just the top half of Kronos Island, but is not physically accessible to the player from Kronos. And apparently, some people online have discovered that Uranos was also supposed to be connected to Kronos. It definitely seems like Kronos was supposed to be a lot bigger than the final product, but all things considered, they still all feel like satisfying open zones to explore. Except Rhea, cause that's not a fleshed out island at all. It's a bare open space with a few towers to climb. If you've played the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Although there are 5 open zones technically, I really would say it's more like 4. But even with this info, I had so much fun with Sonic in these areas. At first, the island maps are blank and you need to complete puzzles to map out the islands to get better vision. These puzzles range from time attacks to brain puzzles. The variety is neat, but none of them are too difficult. However, the main objective for each island is to save your friends and collect Chaos Emeralds. By the way, Knuckles got accidentally stuck here as well. To do this, the primary items to look out for are vault keys and memory tokens. Vault keys are what are needed to unlock the Chaos Emeralds from their vaults, and memory tokens are needed for your friends so they can regain their memories. Pretty self-explanatory. But the awesome thing is that getting these items isn't linear. You can pretty much decide how you collect these items yourself. The main way to get vault keys is through the cyberspace levels. These are accessible through the open zone and require portal gears to access their portals. From the portals, you're transported into cyberspace and play levels that are similar to Sonic Boost games like Unleashed and Generations. Sonic doesn't control as well as he does in those games in these levels, but I still had fun with it for the most part. There are some cyberspace levels that are strictly 2D, which is why towards the end of the game, I started to avoid cyberspace, just not my thing. And as I mentioned earlier, I was able to get vault keys through other means, whether that be finding hidden treasure on the map, beating up enemies, or doing the fishing minigame with Big the Cat. Yes, that's a thing. I was able to complete the story objectives on my own terms, which was really liberating. The same thing can be said for the memory tokens. However, rather than going through cyberspace, these tokens are primarily found in the open zone. You may have recognized the random platforms and rails sprinkled throughout the map. This is where the memory tokens can be found. Some of these can lock you in with the camera so you can't escape, even if you engage with them accidentally, so keep that in mind. They're fun little things to experience on the map, but like I mentioned before, these are mostly optional since you could get memory tokens by other means. One last thing about memory tokens. These actually tie into the majority of the cutscenes between Sonic and his friends, and some of these interactions are optional. I highly recommend collecting as many memory tokens as possible, because these cutscenes are nice to experience and tie into the lore of the series as a whole. There are other collectibles found on the map that I'll explain in more detail when talking about the combat, but a collectible unrelated are the purple coins. I skimmed over it earlier, but a fun little minigame in Frontiers is fishing with Big the Cat. You can find Big by accessing the fishing portals in the open zone. They look very similar to the cyberspace portals. Here, you can use the purple coins to fish and collect a variety of different things. Catching fish is the name of the game, but Big will credit you with currency you can use in his shop to get things like vault keys and memory tokens. I didn't really use this minigame that much until the last island, since I was getting antsy and wanted to see how the game ended. It's pretty funny how you can spend like 10 minutes fishing and essentially bypass objectives in the story very easily. I would say it's almost game breaking what you can do here, but hey, it goes back to being able to progress through the game under your own rules, which I support. Overall, I'd say I really enjoyed traversing Starfall Islands with Sonic. Although the physics can use some polishing, I think Sonic for the most part handles well and the variety of ways to explore is really fun. Some zones are more annoying than others, I'm looking at you Chaos Island, but I never felt like these areas got boring or felt too empty. And one thing you might hear a lot about is the pop-in, but through my experience, I never really noticed nor did it really bother me. Maybe other versions of this game have more serious pop-in, but on the Series X, none of it was a deal breaker for me. Now, let's talk about the combat system in Sonic Frontiers. Normally, taking down enemies in Sonic games consists of just mashing the homing attack and occasionally using the spin dash and stomp features. But in Sonic Frontiers, you have a skill tree that grants you access to different moves that Sonic can use. This includes the Psy-Loop, the Phantom Rush, and even some Dragon Ball inspired moves, all of which are pretty fun to use in my opinion. Straight up, I'll tell you that if you're a fighting game enthusiast or a Devil May Cry fan, I'm not sure if this combat system will impress you, but I can say that it's something Sonic really hasn't had since Unleashed, and in my opinion, is a huge step up from that. Not only is it really satisfying to pull off combos, but it's honestly a spectacle seeing Sonic be badass like this. Some moves are more OP than others, but the good thing is that enemies and mini-bosses get more difficult as you progress through the different islands. And that's another great thing about Frontiers that I was impressed with. I was scared that the variety of enemies wouldn't be that compelling, but I'm happy to say I was wrong about this. Of course, you have your quote-unquote grunt enemies throughout the zones, but the Guardians, which I would call mini-bosses, are the instances you'll really be able to go off with combos. And if not able to use your combos, some of the Guardians have really unique ways to take them down. Take the Strider and the Spider for instance. The Strider requires you to use loop grind rails to take it out, and the Spider literally launches you into the air so you can dive bomb it. Again, battling with Sonic in some of these instances is truly a spectacle and adds so much style to Frontiers. Another thing to mention about the combat system is that Sonic can upgrade his base stats. This includes his attack and defense, as well as his max ring count and top speed. In order to upgrade these stats, you have to collect fruits for his attack and defense, and cocos for the rings and top speed. The fruits can be found by using the numerous methods mentioned earlier like the other collectibles. The cocos, however, are a bit trickier. Cocos are little cute creatures scattered throughout the open zones, but can also be obtained through Big's Fishy minigame. Once you collect the fruits and cocos, you can redeem them for stat upgrades with the Hermit Coco or Elder Coco. These cocos are unique from regular coco and are at fixed locations throughout the open zones. Alright, time to talk about some of the really good stuff with Sonic Frontiers. First, I want to dive deeper into this game's story, but man, where do I even begin? Some of you may be familiar with the name Ian Flynn. In short, he's one of the main writers for the Sonic IDW comics. To say he's qualified to help with a game like this is an understatement, and I would liken him helping with Frontiers to Dave Filoni helping with Star Wars. Two guys that really know their stuff helping franchises that really needed it. For a while, Sonic games really haven't had a deeper story than just, haha, let's make some jokes and take down the bad guys. Although Forces was initially teased as being more serious than recent games in the series, it kind of fell flat and the execution just wasn't there with the storytelling. And I know some people believe Sonic games don't need an in-depth story or shouldn't even be serious in the first place, but I for one enjoy when they try to put a story together like in Adventure 2 and Unleashed. And that's why Frontiers is such a breath of fresh air when it comes to the story. Not only does it take a more serious tone, but it even goes out of its way to tie in past lore. And not just to point out stuff for the sake of nostalgia. Take the premise of the Ancients for instance. The Ancients straight up look like Chaos from Sonic Adventure, and I think that's really neat. This story shows how the Chaos Emeralds were brought to Earth, and how an entire alien species was wiped out by a mysterious entity. The Ancients actually created cyberspace to preserve their dreams and memories because they wanted their knowledge to be passed down to future generations. And pretty much all of their technology was ahead of its time, which makes sense since they weren't from Earth. Additionally, the Cocos on the island actually act as vessels of memory for some of the Ancients of past, and you'll see Sonic and friends helping them out from time to time. But why did Eggman and Sonic's friends get trapped into cyberspace? Well, it's time to talk about one of the newest characters in the series, Sage. Sage has been marketed as the antagonist in Frontiers, but once you start going through the story, you'll realize she's not really a bad guy. Sage was created by Eggman and is the AI that trapped him into cyberspace. The reason she did it was to protect him from the same thing that wiped out the Ancients. Once Sonic and friends approached the Starfall Islands, she tried to protect them the same way as Eggman. However, she didn't expect Sonic to escape. Sage is pessimistic towards Sonic and doesn't believe he'll be able to save his friends. She constantly warns him that he doesn't know what he's doing and that it's all pointless. Obviously, Sonic doesn't listen and continues to complete the objectives the voice at the beginning of the game told him to do. Keep in mind, this voice at the beginning wasn't Sage. As Sonic continues to mess with cyberspace, his body starts to take a physical toll and slowly becomes corrupted by the cyber energy. He pushes through it though because he really wants to save his friends at any cost. Ultimately, once Sonic finally sets his friends free, stuff starts to go down. But before we talk about the ending, we need to talk about the boss battles. Holy crap. This is the most epic Sonic has felt in a long time. Not only do these boss battles let you turn into Super Sonic, but battling these giant things called Titans is unreal. We talked earlier about how cool Sonic looks in combat, but when you do these Titan battles, things get turned up to 11. In total, there are 4 Titan battles in the game, one for each of the real islands. To get the final Chaos Emerald of each island, except in Oranos, you have to face the Titan. Personally, my favorite of the bunch is the second one called the Wyvern. The thing looks like a cybernetic dragon, and flying through the air with it was one of the standout moments to me in Frontiers. Unfortunately, and I hate to say this, these boss battles highlight when Sonic can feel the most jank in Frontiers. If you've played any 3D Sonic game, you know Sonic's handling hasn't always been the best, and there can be a learning curve to it. In some games, he can feel straight up broken. He doesn't feel like this most of the time in Frontiers, but the reason this stands out in Titan battles is because you're flying through the air at high speeds, dodging projectiles, and also trying to figure out how to take the Titans down. Struggling through these boss battles, especially when they're because of issues out of your control, can really take away from these special moments. Ultimately, I think the Titan battles needed a bit more polish so they could have been a smoother experience. Speaking of Titans, let's talk about the ending of Frontiers. Titans were actually created by the Ancients to battle the unknown entity that destroyed their kind. Sage taps into their power so they can battle Sonic, but as you already know, they didn't really stand a chance. This only pertains to the first 3 though, as the last one is actually controlled by the mysterious entity I keep talking about. But what is this entity? I'm still not 100% sure, honestly. This thing was actually sealed away by the ancients into cyberspace along with one of the Titans. As Sonic completed objectives for the thing, it became closer and closer to being released. And once Sonic finished the task on Rhea Island, this thing finally was able to escape. Simultaneously, Sonic became completely corrupted by the cyber energy, but his friends are finally set free. Knowing that Sonic is needed to take down the entity, they use the power of friendship to bring him back. No, seriously, they just go back to being trapped in cyberspace so he can become free of the corruption. Finally, Eggman, Sage, and Sonic agree to team up to take down this entity together. And after collecting the emeralds on Oranos Island, Sonic faces the final Titan, which is named Supreme. This Titan battle I would say was the least satisfying. I really thought the landscape would be a lot more epic, but maybe it wasn't because this isn't the actual final boss. Once defeated, the entity flees the Titan and returns to space. Meanwhile, Sage actually takes over the now vacant Titan, and she and Sonic fly off into the atmosphere. What you're met with is the end. That's the name of the final boss, seriously. The end is what looks like a moon or a planet. I'm still not sure what it was exactly, and unfortunately, because I was playing on normal difficulty, I missed out on the actual fight, which is only accessible through hard mode. But I'm actually happy I didn't get to experience it, because the fight is a bullet hell boss battle. I'm not even joking, look it up. What I did get to experience was some quick time events that has Sonic shoot through the end, but after blasting through it, the planet becomes unstable, and Sage decides to sacrifice herself to contain the explosion. Once the end is defeated, Sonic's friends are freed, and they have a happy reunion on Earth. Eggman, on the other hand, is left alone and seems distraught that he lost Sage, emotions that you normally wouldn't see out of him. There are two cutscenes that occur during the credits, one of which is where Sonic's friends talk about their future plans. As for the other cutscene, Eggman seems to be in the process of bringing Sage back to life, or maybe it's better said back online. I'm not sure, but I doubt that this is the last game we'll see Sage in. Although I loved her character design and the emotional connection she built with Eggman, when Sage quote-unquote died, I didn't feel that impacted. I feel like Sage's character direction took a lot of inspiration from Shadow's character in Adventure 2, and unfortunately, it didn't really do anything for me. I feel like where the story was headed with her character was very obvious, and I didn't feel as connected as I wish I did. Still, all things considered, I'd like to see what they do with Sage if she does make an appearance in a future game. And just to wrap up my thoughts with the story, I really enjoyed it. Even though we couldn't play as Tails, Knuckles, or Amy, I'm very hopeful for what the future holds for these characters. In addition, I was happy that their interactions with Sonic weren't filled with a bunch of quippy jokes and hijinks. There was a sense of urgency and concern between the characters, but also hoped that they were going to get through it together. Ian Flynn and the team did an amazing job making the story feel like it really meant something, and definitely laid the foundation for a sequel. And even though the ending left me with more questions than answers, I feel like we're going to find out these answers in future games. Next up, let's talk about the music in Sonic Frontiers. For those of you who have played this game, you may have noticed that I didn't even touch on the boss battle music. That was intentional. I wanted to talk about all the music together, so let's start with those tracks. Bruh, these vocal tracks are by far the heaviest tracks to ever come out of a Sonic game. Speaking not only as a fan of metal music, but also growing up as a fan of Sleeping with Sirens, hearing Kel Quinn in a Sonic game was a major surprise. I'm happy I didn't have these songs spoiled to me, because as I said before, the moments facing the Titans were some of the most epic parts of the game. The great music doesn't stop there though. Each cyberspace level in Frontiers has a unique electronic track. I'm not too knowledgeable in all the different subgenres of electronic music, but there's a variety of them here, as well as some with vocals. Each open zone also has unique background music. While they're more mellow and toned down tracks, they definitely help set the mood of the game. Also, Big's Fishy minigame has lo-fi background music, which is very fitting. Lastly, let's talk about the main theme and some of the songs that appear in the credits. When the song I'm Here was first teased, I really thought this would become my new favorite Sonic song of all time. The reason I say this is because it reminded me a lot of my current favorite, His World from Sonic 06. The heavy guitars, orchestral backbone, and vocals in I'm Here really stood out to me. But after hearing the full version, I think His World is still my number one. It also didn't help that when I'm Here finally appears in the game, it's during the final Titan battle, which I already discussed my thoughts on. Sage actually gets her own song during the credits, which is a melancholic vocal track that talks about her mission and how she hopes she made Eggman proud. There is one more credit song in addition to this one, but this song varies depending on the difficulty you played on. Since I played on normal mode, Vandalized by 1OK Rock played for me. This was one of the songs teased before the game released, and it's one of my favorites in the game. Fun fact, I've actually been fortunate enough to see them in concert a couple times here in the States, and they're an amazing live band. Definitely recommend checking them out. The other track that can play in the credits will appear if you played on hard mode. This one is called One Way Dream, and actually features vocals from Nate Wants to Battle. This is what I would say is the most standard Sonic song in the game, but I don't mean that in a bad way. It reminds me a lot of songs like Endless Possibility and Reach for the Stars because it features more positive and uplifting lyrics, which I enjoy. Nate did a great job on this song, and if you haven't already, I highly recommend you check out his Sonic the Hedgehog cover album. And just as a final note, hats off to Tomoyo Watani and the entire sound team. Y'all killed it with this one. Definitely now one of my favorite OSTs. So by now, you can probably already guess that I'm someone who liked this game rather than disliked it. I pointed out quite a few flaws, but overall, none of them were really deal breakers to me. But before I get into my final thoughts, I want to talk about nitpicking, which seems to be causing a lot of discourse around this game currently. Right off the bat, I want to say that having a negative opinion about this game is totally fine. People are entitled to their own opinions, whether you agree with it or not. That's what makes discussions important and how we can learn from one another. What isn't okay is to shove your ideas and opinions down other people's throats in any context really. If you've watched any of my reviews, you'll notice I'm pretty favorable on the games I play and don't really get into nitpicking. Bashing a game, pointing out every single flaw, and being overly pessimistic is just not my thing. I do realize though there are a ton of things that people can nitpick with Frontiers, whether it be the subpar physics or the fact that it is in Sonic Mania. I've seen many perspectives on why people either love or hate this game. I've also seen some people who are doubters have fun with it and vice versa. Frontiers is a polarizing Sonic game, just like most of the games in the series, but objectively, I don't think this is a bad Sonic game. And this is the main point I'm trying to make. It isn't a bad Sonic game in context, but when it gets compared to its AAA counterparts of this year, like Elden Ring and God of War, of course it doesn't hold a candle to them. It's not even in the same league. You can make an argument that it's not fair to compare games of completely different genres, but when they share a similar price point and in a discussion about games in general, Frontiers will fall flat. Sonic Team has a ton of work to do to make an impactful Sonic game that will really impress a general audience. That's how a franchise like this will continue to grow, by winning people over that wouldn't normally play a Sonic game. But for now, I think what they made with Frontiers is a step in the right direction. You can tell they put a lot of heart into it. I would say from what I've seen, most Sonic fans enjoyed this one, including myself. However, Frontiers shouldn't be immune to criticism, even if it's one of the best Sonic games to have released in years. I want the next Sonic game to shed the stigma of being a good Sonic game, and rather just be called a good game without any excuses. I believe that this can be achieved, and I'm sincerely rooting for Sonic Team. Well, here are my final thoughts on Sonic Frontiers. I think it's an amazing Sonic game, and I had loads of fun with it. It really made me happy to see Sonic Team finally take Sonic in a new direction, and really deliver a product that I had fun with. I've already been replaying some of it since recording my playthrough, and it still puts a smile on my face. I'm really happy that this game exists. However, I can't in good faith recommend this game at full price, especially if you're on the fence about it. Obviously, if you have the money to spare, I'd say go for it, but for anyone that isn't a big Sonic fan or just wants to try this game out, I'd say wait until you can catch it on sale. This year was jam-packed with Sonic content, from Sonic Movie 2 to Sonic Origins to Sonic Frontiers, and even the upcoming Sonic Prime. Sonic fans were living it up. For me, I really enjoyed keeping up with all of it, and it helped distract me through some rough times this year. I think it'll be a few months until I do another Sonic game review, but I have a lot of other game reviews planned as well as other content, so make sure to keep it posted. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more gaming content from me. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see in the next mainline Sonic game. And if you're interested, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Sixang for updates and funny posts. Thank you so much for watching, hope you tune into the next one, and have a great rest of your day. Peace!